All right, gang. I am here. I'm really excited to be talking to Mr. John Orphan, who is a cinematographer for a really cool horror film. The whole time I was watching it, I was like, damn, this is like a really fresh take on a favorite genre of the people who listen and watch to our show. I know Stoker Hills is a really cool horror film. And so, John, I am excited to have you on to be able to talk to you about it, buddy. Thank you very much for taking the time out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Uh, this film, whenever I get to talk to a cinematographer, it's really cool because coming out of film school, I always ask like the typical like film school nerd questions: "What'd you shoot it on?" All that kind of stuff. But this one is so different, and if it's a little bit of a spoiler, because I know this is a new film. I'm sorry if you're listening to this and it spoils it, but the way you guys chose for this thing to progress in the narrative timeline, in the back and forth from from third person to POV like material, I thought was really, really, really cool. Because my first question to you when I started watching it was, I'm like, okay, I got the DP coming on for this film. Um, we're trying to map out a found footage thing, our little crew is right now. So I was like, cool, I'm gonna ask him all these questions about like maneuverability, all this different stuff. Like, did the actor have the camera? All whatever. And then like it kind of like flips at a moment, and you go into the detective's office, and that scene where he's got the camera on the desk, and I'm like, oh shit! Like they just like pulled us out of the found footage and brought us into like it has the set design was like very noir, and the whole thing was just it was really really an unexpected like cherry on top of was developing into a cool story anyway. But so how was that, man, like right out of the get as a cinematographer when you kind of meet with the director and kind of plan this out where hey, I want to go found footage with parts, but I want to go traditional like third person perspective traditional film with parts too. What was that like for you?
Well, Ben, the director, and Jonah had been working. They'd been in pre-production for a long time on this. This is kind of like their baby, and Jonah should be credited with the way that the structure of the story was going for sure. He's the one that wrote it to be that way, and so we talked about different ways in which to do it. And initially, we had kind of thought that we were going to use a very small camera. The one that you
Mm-hmm.
kind of see, that was the exact one, actually. It was a Sony A7S that we were going to give to the actors to run around with and collect that footage later. After like the first day, we kind of realized that was a little bit too challenging for the actors because they're trying to think about what they're doing, stay in character, and then think about this. So we moved over to most of the found footage is actually the Red Weapon 6K
Okay.
um, that I was operating. And then we just kind of brought it down and made it into to look more like video. But there were some times when we really needed them to be carrying the camera, where we see their feet running on the ground, or they're running over, really rocky terrain. That we would
Mm-hmm.
give them a smaller, much less expensive camera to do with, and then we would take that footage and manipulate it so it felt like what it was supposed to feel like.
And so with that, do you like coach them? Like, hey, as like in your mind
Yeah.
as a cinematographer, you know what you want it to look like. You've talked to the director.
Mhm.
He obviously knows what he's looking for. So are you like, okay, bro, like whatever you do in this take, I need you to get your feet. I need you to get this. I need you to get this. Like
Exactly.
how
Exactly. We would run through it. Said, I need to see that you're holding the camera. I want to see your feet, and then I need you to pan up really quickly and show the other actor, and then back out to where you're going. And so then we do that in slow motion a couple times because there were some. I mean, it was the entire shoot was a night shoot, so everybody was waking up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, getting ready, and then showing up on set at 5 p.m. and then
mm,
working all night. And that does some weird stuff to your physical abilities sometimes.
yeah,
Honestly, your
yeah, yeah.
clock is all messed up. So we kind of wanted to be careful, and plus we were working. It was cold, it was dark,
Mhm.
it was wet, and so you have to be careful with all of these things so that people don't get injured while we're doing this stuff. So
And
yeah,
where were you guys at?
we were in Los Angeles.
You were okay.
Yeah, yeah, we were picking. There was some north of LA, northeast of LA, right on the outskirts of the Angeles National Forest.
Is when in the scene where you got where the characters like roll up to the lair, for lack of a better term, of where his building is.
Yeah.
Some of those highways when they're out there, I'm like, that looks like LA, but it looks way colder than LA. Like when they're kind of just like standing around, or when he's hiding in the forest and stuff, like I'm like,
Mhm.
damn, maybe it's not LA. And so I was going back and forth in my mind. Um,
Well,
but
I think it's supposed to be this fictional town that you don't know exactly where it is. Ironically, we shot that in February. I don't remember which, it was 2019 or something like that. It was freezing. It was really cold those nights. It was like in the 40s every single night. I think there's even a scene when we're at that lair you're talking about, and one of the cars is covered in frost. That frost is real. That
nice.
was how cold it was. So yeah, it
Wow.
kind of gives you the impression that you're not in Southern California.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
The aesthetic of filming any project on any set, I gotta imagine, is awesome. But some of the aesthetic choices that the set design put together and the way that you frame it, like the one that instantly comes to mind is like the room that looks like it's got a bunch of bullet holes and then the light coming through
Oh
and
yeah.
almost like these rays. Like that's such a cool shot. Like that, like
Thanks.
what was it like to get to, because that this movie has like several different environments that you guys filmed in. What one was your favorite to get to mess around in?
Um, let's see. There was the actual interior of the villain's lair is in downtown Los Angeles, um,
Mm,
and the basement area where we were shooting in, that place was so creepy just on its own. And then a production designer who was brilliant, Derek Hinneman, and his team, um, they were just they're all artists. They're incredible, and they made a creepier place like almost so scary you didn't want to be down there alone. Like in between like breaks for lunch and stuff and walking, I was like, oh, I don't want to hang out down here unless we're doing something, because it looked horrific and I mean really scary. And so that area was probably my favorite to shoot in because um, there was so much to do. There's so much. It just on its own, it just kind of really became what it was supposed to be, a villain's lair.
yeah.
Fun.
The way that you spun the whole found footage horror subgenre and chose to interweave that regular just horror film in there with it, it really kind of like presents itself to something that is, it's got like the goriness, the brutality of what he being the bad guy doing to people, like almost at like a Saw level. And then the chase scenes when they're running, it's like Blair Witch comes back into mind, where you're, as the viewer, you're like, what are you scared of? Like, what do you see? Um, and then the backstory with the detectives and the fact that the bad guy has history with them. Like there's a lot of kettles in the fire and like layers of story with this thing that make it a really good watch for you guys on set. um are you guys all like horror movie fans, or when you were meeting like pre-production wise, like I'm curious, when you guys are putting that together, were you guys more of the crew where it's all out of his head and he's conveying that to you, or were there references like that, like his lair, like the way that we shoot it, he's moving through the room, and the dude laid out on the floor, or the wheelchair that looks like they've been bloodletting someone, like that's got like the saw aesthetic, like are there reference points in pre-production when you're sitting down to film this thing, or is it all just like storyboards and this is purely like from what I'm trying to convey when they're talking to you?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I think I don't remember exactly how Ben found me, but he called me up one day and told me that he thought that, my existing aesthetic was good for what they were doing, and he was right, because that's the kind of stuff that naturally comes out of me. Not necessarily horror, but just dark kind of, dramatic stuff. Like most of the stuff with the detectives, and actually, honestly, in pre-production when we were talking about this, and in the first pass of color correction of this movie, it was much darker
Hmm.
and creepier. And I think they just got, I think, when we were talking about business and distribution and stuff, that they loosened up on that a little bit. But what we talked about was, Ben and I discussed the movie Seven quite a bit.
Mm.
And movies like that, because we felt like if we leaned too hard into like a horror kind of aesthetic,
Hmm.
Subconsciously people would kind of see things coming, and so we wanted to kind of keep it like, here's the found footage stuff, and
Hmm.
and the look we went for was a little bit brighter and nicer, and then here's a thriller kind of situation. And so when you get to the points of where this is actually pretty gory,
Hmm.
it seems a little bit more real. Like we're not trying to gross you out. It's just like, this is how it exists.
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
Yeah.
It's not like over the top or anything. It's like
Right.
very like you just said, real is the best way to describe it. Like that's how it would, if it was happening in front of me. This is probably pretty close to what it was actually looking like.
Right. And that's what we were going for. We're like, let's make this look really real. So yeah.
I was just gonna say, what was your favorite like scene to film? I know you said the set design of the basement and the lair and all that was cool to shoot, but did you have a particular scene? This really, I asked you two parts. Like, what was your favorite to help them kind of map out found footage wise, and then what was your favorite that you were behind the camera, filming in the moment?
Let's see. I think there's a couple of them. I think the room. This is a spoiler. The room that they end up in, where there's a pile of bodies.
Yeah.
That whole room, designing that, like Derek's work on that, and I don't even know if you can see all of it, but it was really a work of art by the time
Mm.
he was done with it. And then stacking all those bodies, which are actual real people, just covered in blood. Our makeup artist did all that stuff, and then so that room was pretty. It was fun because it was like, wow, this looks as horrible as we need it to look, and as scary as we need it to look. So that was fun to shoot. And then the other thing, I think the found footage was, I think one of the most fun things was, and I don't know how it comes across, I'll have to go back and look at it, but we had stunt drivers for when they're chasing the bad guy in his car.
Oh, dang,
And
nice.
so I had to be in there, and we had to drive at a certain pace. We had two, with the kids' car, and that was the one our stunt driver was driving, and then we were chasing after the bad guy's car, and I had to be in there filming, and we're driving, and we're going really fast, because when you're filming this direction, you have to go at the speed you want it to look like. Otherwise, it just kind of it doesn't look fast.
Right.
So we were going close to 50 miles an hour on dirt roads, doing Dukes of Hazzard stuff, and it was a lot of fun. It was good.
So what kind of rigs? That was always something that I never got the biggest grip on, was the rig to use for filming something like that. So I was always, it's funny that you said that the detective's camera that they had on the desk was the Sony AS7, because that's what we used, was the AS7. And I didn't have a gimbal or anything. Like now I'm got some more cash to look into that kind of stuff. So anytime we were doing like you're describing, this takes place in a car. This is, them breaking up as they're driving or whatever. Like that, to keep it steady sucks. Like when you're going through all that stuff. So how were you rigged up? I imagine you got to have like a steady cam here, and then like, are you strapped in the back seat, or like what were you doing?
No, I'm trying to remember which camera I had in there. I had the A7S, and I think I'll have to go back and look at that, but I think there was like an Apple box and a sandbag on top of that, and that was braced like this. So when
Wow.
we're going, so
Yeah.
and it was okay that it felt a little bit like frenetic, for that
Sure.
situation because they're driving. So that came across. But as far as like the difference between like all the stuff we did with the detectives, we kept on dollies or tripods because we wanted to be everything about it to be completely different from the found footage. So you knew unmistakably that you were in a completely different world. You were looking at it through a completely different point of view.
What kind of experience, if any, did you get to have with Tony Todd? Because that is Mount Rushmore of horror icons.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
how was he?
He was incredible. He was amazing, and just this amazing professional guy. And he knew that, of course, all the crew knows exactly who he is and where he's from and all this stuff. And so he was very, gracious and everything, and just kind of talked to everybody to get everybody. Because once you have somebody of, you get a bunch of people working who work on horror films a lot, and he's royalty. He's horror royalty. So he did a lot to introduce himself to everybody, so everyone was calmed down a little bit. Like, yeah, I'm a real person. And then, which was great. He's a great
Mhm.
guy, and he also was just magnificent and prepared. Like, knew all his lines for this tiny little movie we're making. Just was 100% prepared and in character and on point, and it was great. It was wonderful to work with him.
He's kind of like a Bill Moseley to me, like where he is the same tonality of his voice, but the character that he portrays, like the dude, he was a film teacher, and then
Yeah,
he can go over here and be, Final Destination. He can be death, the persona of death, and the way that he like his speech pattern is very similar, but I don't know. There's just like a way about his that he can express himself and emote that makes you feel completely different. It's
yeah.
very cool to see him do different stuff other than just like Candyman or anything, just because he's got a lot of range that he can tap into.
Yeah, and you recognize that right away. So he starts acting, you're like, "Whoa, he is a college professor," you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
immediately. Yeah, he's great. He's fantastic. It was an honor to work with that kind of talent. It's fun.
Yeah, the other two that I thought were really great in this thing were the two detectives that we keep talking
Yeah.
about. Like
Mhm.
their back and forth. It almost reminded me. I don't know, 5-10 years ago when Fox did uh, the series Gotham. It was
Oh,
like
okay. Yeah. Mhm.
but it was like a young Jim Gordon, and then I'm forgetting the other guy who was like his partner. But that was like the way that they played off of each other reminded me a lot of that. Where I said the noir feel to it, and it's more towards the way that him and even the head detective with his hat and everything, like the the way that they were able to play off of each other and kind of bounce from scene to scene, and as things progress and escalate, like I thought they were really good.
They were, and they were great to work with too because they were always just uh, bringing it. They were great. They were great, and they had really good chemistry off camera as well.
So have you, John, like horror is such a cumbersome genre because of all the subgenres that it can have under its umbrella. Um, was there a particular like film that got you? It doesn't have to be a horror film, but if was there one that was like, man, I want to do this as my career? Was there some kind of a inspiration?
Oh, what was I inspired by? It wasn't necessarily a film in particular. I think because when I watch, I've always loved films.
Mhm.
And then, I studied psychology in college for a little while and then switched over to film. And while doing that, ended up getting to work as a PA on a movie that was filming in my hometown back in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when I was there and I saw the camera department working, that was what really, I was like, okay, now I know what I want to do because I saw what they were doing. I'd always loved photography and everything about it. So that's really what, got me inspired. But, after that, when I started understanding of what to focus on when looking at films, it was movies like, Apocalypse Now, you
Mm,
know, Schindler's List.
mm.
Those were some of the things that, oh, and ironically, Seven, because that was around the time that movie came out around the time that I was just discovering what it was I wanted to do. So for that to be an inspiration on this, that was kind of an
That's
interesting.
cool. Like a little full circle moment
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Not just strictly as a fan of movies, do you have a favorite scary movie?
Favorite scary movie. I do. There's so many that I love so much. I feel like it's so hard to say just one, but I could say that you know I love I love The Shining. Scared the hell
Mm,
out of me.
mm.
It Follows, and then something that's not mentioned so much anymore. It had a huge impact for me because I saw it in the theater. But
Mm.
honestly, the Blair Witch Project is one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
Blair Witch Project was a groundbreaking film
Yeah,
because I can remember watching that movie with my dad in the theater, and there's probably, I don't know, 10 people in the theater total. And there's a couple right behind us. And the best like reaction between the two of them, because the boyfriend was like, that was garbage. I can't believe we paid for that. And then the girlfriend was like, what are you talking about? That was the scariest movie I've seen in like 5, 10 years.
yeah.
You weren't scared? I was like fucking terrified.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that is the reaction of just groundbreaking like moment in film. That fact that you can have a reaction in the same room, same viewing, and have like polar opposite like takes.
Hmm.
That's a movie that's going to be around for a long time. I can remember being like 13 years old and thinking that like, wow, like the room is that split. Like you said, it hasn't been talked about in a little while, but that is one that will, I think, stand the test of time for a long time, just for that reason.
Yeah,
On
yeah.
top of all, on top of all the like the groundbreaking stuff production wise they did.
Hmm. Yeah, there were people in the theater that left because they were too scared around us. I was watching. I was sitting there with my girlfriend, and there was a row of people sitting in front of us and to the side of us and across the hall. I'll never forget this. So it was a packed theater, and the three people in front of us got. I heard them say, "I can't take it anymore. It's too scary. I gotta go." And these were adults. And then
Wow.
someone else like I saw that they were leaving, and they're like, "I can't take it. I can't take it. I have to go." And my girlfriend, who was with me, says, "I don't know if I can. I'm not going to make it through this thing." And I was
Wow.
petrified. And I think it has something to do. I hate to say this, but the truth of the matter is, I feel like because you're not seeing a lot,
Hmm.
it plays on a person's imagination. And if you have an overactive imagination, that's where, if you have very detailed, creative imagination,
Hmm.
I think it's going to be a lot scarier than.
There's a director who came on years ago on the show, and he said the biggest mistake I made in the film, he had done a monster film, and he says the biggest mistake that I had done was Cave, and I showed it at the end. He's
Yeah,
like, because the whatever you have in your mind that's manifested at that point, way scarier than anything that we could put together.
right.
And that from the scene with the tents, where when you like break it down, it's like it's just some crew members doing this to
Yeah,
the tent.
yeah,
But in the moment, it's freaking scary because you
yeah,
don't know. You're terrified.
yeah.
Um,
And that was
but
kind of the reason that Ben and I had been talking about in early pre-production, that we wanted to make this as dark and scary as we possibly could, as to use that blackness in
mhm.
there to affect the audience's imagination as much as possible, to give them something to get carried away with in their own minds.
Do you think
That was a goal in going as dark as we tried to go to begin with.
is that? Do you think that right there affected the villain's costuming? How he is just kind of he's almost blacked out in certain points with what he's wearing. He's almost like a shadow.
Yeah, well, we also, we knew that we needed to have, you know, exposure behind him in order that he stood out as a silhouette, because we didn't want to give too much away, because it's so much scarier when you can't see. And
Hmm.
if you can't see the details on the thing you're fighting, it's worse. And so that, yeah, we absolutely, we put him in shadow as much as possible. And I definitely know that the wardrobe department made sure that everything was as dark and as matte as possible and wasn't reflecting anything it didn't need to.
And with that, this you talked about the stunt driver and stuff, but when there's an altercation with him and then the guys are doing found footage with him,
Hmm.
how much practice was that laid out? Because that now you're not only just like doing like, hey, I need to see um your feet hit on the ground as you're running. I need to see like some trees. I need to see the other guy, like you guys both made it out of there or whatever. But when you bring in a killer on top of that, now you're like choreographing movement and like violent movement,
Hmm.
and it's found footage. So dude's got a camera in his hand and he's having to let the audience know that, hey, he's surviving for his life type of a thing. Like, how much of that did you guys kind of like have to map out and stuff? Because there is a fair amount of that kind of stuff.
We had to map it all out. We had two really great stunt performers, Linda and Dorian. They're incredible, and we're so lucky we had them, because at first we had debated about it because there was some amount of stunt stuff going on and fighting stuff, but we figured, at an early we were like, you know what, but it's very basic, and our lead actor who's playing the villain is
Mhm.
very athletic and knows what he's doing. Should we hire a whole stunt crew? And we ended up doing that, and we're really glad we did, because Linda and Dorian were absolutely incredible, and they choreographed that whole fight sequence.
That's
Every time we had some sort of altercation where there was physicality going on, they were
mhm.
right there explaining it to us exactly how it had to be done, so that everyone stayed safe. And again, it's 40 degrees and sometimes raining, and it's 3:30 in the morning. So
That yeah, the choice of which you guys chose, where you guys chose to film those scenes out there,
mhm.
how much of location scouting did you get to do any of that as the cinematographer of it? Did you get to go and accompany location scouts and stuff and be like, that I could totally see us shooting here versus anywhere else? Did you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We did location scout for, I mean, quite a bit. We went around all over the place. The forest area where the trailer is. You see that trailer, which ironically, interestingly enough, a bit of trivia there. That same trailer is in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it
Oh,
was
really? Huh?
to look just like it did on the Spawn Ranch. So if you go back and look at pictures of the Spawn Ranch, you'll see that same trailer, and it was painted for, and we just left it that way. So
Wow.
interestingly enough, you'll see the same trailer, and it's very prominent in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But yeah, the forest area where that trailer is was first supposed to be up in Angeles Crest Forest, like way, way up in altitude, and it was a really great area, huge trees all around. It was going to be great. And about 2 days before we went to go, there was a snowstorm in the mountains, a really, really bad one. All the roads were closed, and we had to take giant trucks. I mean, we had to tow that trailer up there. We had condors for huge lights to simulate moonlight that we were bringing up, and there was no way we were going to get them up to 6,000 feet on snowy roads. So we ended up having to cancel, that week of shooting and reschedule. And we ended up shooting all the forest stuff right in the middle of Los Angeles and down right in the middle of Griffith Park, where there wasn't any
Wow.
really snow. And that proved to have challenges of its own, because there's a lot of rules when you're in a public park. So,
Yeah.
that was probably the most challenging location situation.
So in Griffin Park, what spot were you guys at? Were you closer to like the Disney carousel side or closer to the observatory? Where were you guys at?
We, believe it or not, this is the strangest thing. There's a cluster of woods that is right in the middle of the golf course,
Oh,
and that's
okay.
where we were. It's like flat land next to mountains, with a bunch of forest, and then we're surrounded on all sides by golf course. It was so
Wow.
strange. Yeah.
Wow.
So we're basically every time you see, we're shooting into the forest, and behind us is golf.
And you brought up, something that I know on the production side of things, people may be curious about. As a DP, what is your favorite tool or aesthetic to simulate moonlight? Because that's been a
Mhm.
topic I've seen like debated again and again, what color gel to use and what kind of lights to use and all that kind of stuff. So what do you feel like makes like the best, this is them out in the middle, just moonlight is the only light type aesthetic?
Right. Well, I mean, the moon is basically just a gigantic bounce, and
Right.
it's bouncing sunlight, and that sunlight is coming back to the Earth. And because the moon is so far away, it ends up being a point source, which is a little sharper. But I like soft light, so anytime I'm able to bounce light,
Mhm.
use a very large unit with a very large soft bounce.
Mhm.
That's what I kind of aim to do,
Hmm.
when the budget allows. But you know, to do that sometimes, and also
Yeah.
I prefer to have the moonlight come from a natural, uh,
Source.
a natural kind of distance and height.
I
So
got
I
you.
like to get it up as high as possible. I think we had the moon. I mean, it was a little lower for this. There were some issues that we had technically, but at least 40 or 50 feet up.
Wow.
That's my goal usually.
The challenge of it shooting, all at nighttime, what would you say besides getting accustomed to the hours? Um, what do you think doing that as far as cinematography presents, challenge wise, that you as a cinematographer have to adapt to versus if it was just like 60% during the afternoon, evening, 40% nighttime type of a thing? Is it kind of you got to like put a completely different mind frame on it, or is it just kind of you're doing, I'm shooting this thing day, night, whatever? What would you say the major adjustments are?
Well, let's see. There's a lot more cable, and night the way that we were doing it. That
Mhm.
said, it sometimes ends up being a lot easier,
Hmm.
because I have complete control over what is in darkness and what is in light. Whereas when I'm shooting, outside during the day and you see everything, I kind of have to, exist with nature and do what nature is telling me to do, and try to, you know, argue or lean into whatever nature is giving me. So at night it's like working in a black box. So
Yeah,
it's physically harder for the crew, but um, it gives us a lot more control.
I like the black box analogy. That's a
Mhm.
good way of looking at it. The and, and with this movie, I'm pretty sure it is now readily available. People can get a streaming of it right now.
Yes, I think it is. It's streaming now. Yeah,
Um,
iTunes, I'm not sure exactly all the platforms it's on. It's on a bunch of platforms though.
yeah, I know it's on Amazon. I would imagine if it's on Amazon, it's on Apple, and then the trickle down of wherever else you can get your stream copy of it. But
Hmm.
this film, um, you working with the director that you worked with and everything, do you anticipate maybe down the line you guys getting together to do another project?
Yeah, he's sent me a script and some kind of mock-ups of what they're planning on doing for the next one already.
Nice.
So, and that one's a much bigger movie. And I mean, budget wise and just like all the things involved with it, and is truly, truly frightening. So I'm
Nice.
excited about that. Yeah. Yeah.
The question that I always liked to talk about to people before we let them go is, you right now currently, what are you digging as just a fan here on these times of lockdowns and resends and lockdowns and resends? We have
Hmm.
got pretty familiar with getting to intake our fixes of movies and shows from at home. Although
Mhm.
I am on our show on a weekly basis a pretty big advocate for, if it's in the theater and your theater is open and you're comfortable, go support your theater. But um, what have you been digging, man? Show wise, like what's on right now that you are just unwinding and enjoying?
I have been watching the new season of Ozark,
Okay,
and actually, spent the last few weeks just catching up on all that, rewatching the entire series. So I was, just ready for,
the
uh,
new stuff.
yeah, 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 which has been incredible. They're amazing what they're doing. Um, let's see what else. I've been watching a lot of like true crime documentaries.
Okay, seems like there's more and more of those coming out lately.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think people love that stuff. There's one called City of Angels, City of Death. It's about there was a time in Los Angeles, I think in the late 70s or early 80s, in which there were 5 serial killers running around in
Holy
Los Angeles at
smokes!
the same time. And so LAPD was kind of going crazy, going, "What do we got to do to make this stop?"
Yeah,
And that is a fascinating documentary series.
I
So
will. I will definitely check that. What do you remember? What platform had that one?
I believe it's on Netflix. If it's not on Netflix, it is, oh gosh, HBO. I'm not sure which.
Okay.
It is riveting, and
I yeah.
edge of your seat. They did such a great job with it, and the photography in that is excellent as well.
Just your synopsis of it. That just seems like holy smokes. That's a blockbuster in itself.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It could have been. It could have been. I wonder if it was pitched as a narrative film rather than a documentary first.
Um, and you, John, do you? I know Stoker Hills is so new as far as us getting to watch it, but are you, working on anything right now or anything else, in the immediate, future here coming out in 2022 or early 23 with your name on it that we
Yeah.
can look forward to?
I worked on. Let's see. I did a movie in Montana
Oh,
recently called For the Night. That one's also a horror film, also very
hmm.
scary, also found footage,
Huh.
interestingly enough. Um, and then I have another thing coming up called Reap Sow. It's written and directed by a really amazing writer named Curtis Clark, and that is about. Oops, I'm sorry.
No,
We have
it's
a
all right.
fire
Go ahead.
engine out there. That is about a writer that's going back to his hometown to try to solve a case of a serial killer that was never found back in when he was growing up. And so that's coming up. That shoots in Michigan.
Yeah, a lot of Midwest stuff. You
Yeah,
being
yeah.
you being from Michigan, but my family, I have family that lives part time in Ohio,
Okay.
and the aesthetic of like that Midwest to like what we're used to in California
Hmm.
really lends itself to good scary stuff.
Oh, it really does. It
As
really
far as like if this happened like our town, like if this happened downtown, I'm like, okay, it's scary. Yeah, but if it happened in downtown where my aunt and uncle live, like completely different ball game. Like it's not just scary because you're stuck, it's scary because there's no one around. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and it's also, I mean, there's something just about the way the light hits things in that
mhm.
part of the world, just where we are on the planet. As far as, I mean, you can look at like scary movies filmed in like suburban areas in Southern California don't look as scary as, like, say for instance, It Follows, totally
Sure.
shot in Detroit. That movie, I mean, you can watch it with the sound off. It's scary looking.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact the kind of monster it follows has, it's almost tied into like you said you're a huge fan of The Shining, the
Mhm.
relentless following. You could say, the kid walking down the street and it follows and it mirrors Jack Torrance walking through the hedge mage of that just constant like presence is just going to until it gets to where it needs to get to type of a
Yeah.
thing. But some of those shots in It Follows were very, yeah, that movie was creepy.
Yeah.
Um, with that, man, is there a good spot for people to keep track of where you got? Like, are you know, Instagram, Twitter, or anything? Where
Yeah, yeah. My Instagram is it's at John_Orphan. It's JOHN_ORPHAN. And then also my website is really easy to find. It's just johnorphan.com. It's JOHNORPHAN.com, just like it sounds.
right on, man. The fact that you know put this one out, which was super cool to watch, and it was a fun horror movie. It's definitely scary. The I always love it when you know a new, you know, for lack of a better term, horror icon character is created, and it's not
Mhm.
like Halloween 12 or something where
Yeah.
it's like a new character that you can even in the fans mind eye can create different scenarios of, well, what would he do here and blah blah
Yeah.
blah. So this one was cool, and I'm glad that you guys seem like you're going to come together again, because I would look forward to seeing something bigger, scarier, maybe bloodier for all I know. But it was a lot of fun, man. So I congratulate you
Cool.
on a really rad movie, and everybody out there, go see Stoker Hills, and check out johnorphan.com to see what John's got in the works next. So thank you again, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.